Hello and welcome to a special episode of DCP Plus SideQuest. This week we're featuring Thomas Mahler from Moon Studios, the CEO of Moon Studios, not just from
That's
Moon
correct.
Studios, and the creative director. Is that right as well?
That's correct too. Yeah.
Yeah. So Moon Studios, creator of No Rest for the Wicked and the Ori games.
That's very much correct.
All right. That's all I got to add.
This is the most professional you've been,
That's it.
Brian.
We're gonna hang out in the bathroom for the next hour. Let me know when you're done.
I've reached the limit of my knowledge.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's going to be very cool to talk about everything that you're doing. There's a lot going on with Wicked. There's a lot been going on and more to come. So I'm really excited to hear more about just the studio and the process of making the game and kind of what your plans are for the future.
Well, let's do it.
Take it away, Fran.
Fran.
Wow,
bring it down.
I'm the most talkative. Don't put that on me. What's a great intro question here?
Yeah, what's a good launching point?
I do think one of the big questions I actually did have on my mind is that Moon Studios is a well-known studio that is working in now the early access format. Ori, I don't believe, was in early access, and you've also now gone fully independent, I believe. And so maybe if you could just talk a little bit about like those choices and
why we picked early access.
Yeah, how is early access in terms of like a risk, and why not just wait to release it? And in the scope of like larger development, being with big, publishers and going independent. So how do you feel about being, a known studio in early access and how it's going?
Let me dive into it. So, basically, it's not like we had much choice, right? So, because what we set out to do was we always made packaged products, right? So, Ori was very much just on release. It is what it is. And then for Will of the Wisps, it was the same, right? But internally, we always had the struggle of when you get to, we are a year away from release, right? And then you take inventory, right? And you're like, oh my God, there's these features that we will never get done in just a couple months now, right? So we have to cut stuff, right? And that was true for Blind Forest. That was also true for Will of the Wisps, right? And it always hurts, right? Like you have some really cool feature in the game that somebody spent half a year on, right? And we're like, nobody will ever see that. Bye-bye, right?
Yeah, that's rough.
Yes, and then the other thing that always happened to us is that when the games released, and thankfully we always had a good reception to our games, but still when we watched streams, we always saw these little things, right? Things that like, here's a small bug, or here's some feature that, like we couldn't get in anymore. And every single time we were like, God damn it, like we had this almost done. I bugged this 6 months ago or something, right? And we just couldn't get it done. So we very much approached Wicked with like the mindset of, hey, it's an ARPG, right? ARPGs generally don't just come out and that's what they are, and they don't, like evolve anymore, right? And we very much love the idea of like, because we're all very much perfectionists at Moon. I think there's really like, there's this drive at Moon that we want to put something on the market that is just as close to perfect as we can make it. And the way to achieve that, or the only way to achieve that with an ARPG is that, well, you need to get it out there because it's so systemic and there's so much, frankly, also maths behind it and so on, right? That you can't test at scale with like, if you're an 80, 90 person team, even if you're Blizzard and you have 300, 400 people working on the game, It's a completely different thing once 1 million or 2 million people or so play the game. So that's why with ARPGs, you always have seen, the game is out there, and then, oh my God, it still needs patches, it still needs updates, right? So we approached Take-Two back then with that, right? And with the whole idea of like, hey, we're not going to do a public beta or something here. Why don't we just go early access, right? Like many studios are doing it now. Larian has just done it. It seems pretty successful. Let's just do that, right? But it was scary as shit, right? Because it was the first time we did it. And generally, we don't have any safety net or anything right now, right? Like there is no other game in the background that funds us or something. So every now and then you basically bet the entire company on certain things, right? But we felt pretty confident that this thing that we're making, No Rest for the Wicked, should become a pretty huge hit. Like if we're doing this right, it should really perform well, right? Because and maybe I'm stupid, but like one of the reasons why I thought that was I remember playing A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo, and I remember how long and how often it was in the charts, right? And I think there is something about just top-down games and action adventures and that kind of thing, right? Where it appeals to a whole lot of people. So, for example, with Ori, I heard from a lot of people that, oh, really cool game, looks nice, but I'm not into 2D platformers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we did the interviews and we showed Wicked for the first time to people, I never got that reception. Like it was always, oh my God, that's like Zelda, or oh my God, that's like Diablo. I really want to work on this. So I think just generally there's a pretty broad appeal. And yeah, I mean, we also just mix a whole bunch of stuff, right? The elevator pitch that I gave to Take-Two back then and so on was always like, hey, we want to make a game where it's a top-down ARPG. We'll take, like we look at like Souls-like combat, and we want to evolve that even further. And we think we have something really good going because you don't have the right analog stick where you don't, have to screw around with the camera, so we can do all these special attacks and all of this stuff. And then the other idea was, well, we want the exploration, right? Because we made Metroidvanias for 10 years, and a lot of what makes a good Metroidvania is just really good level design. And we just love that, crafting every single inch of the world, right? In many ways, I wanted to question that unwritten rule that existed for a long time in ARPGs, right? That everything has to be procedurally generated. But whenever I played ARPGs, that never really mattered that much to me. I always felt like, hey, if you play Diablo and you play whatever, Loot Lane or some other area, right? And, you turn the computer off, you play it again. It's like, yeah, the map has changed a little bit, right? But it's not like these random generators create amazing level design after amazing level design or something, right? So our goal was to basically approach it from the other side, right? That it's like, no, we'll handcraft this crazy 3D open world. But then what's inside it, how the enemies are there, right? What quests you encounter and all of that stuff, we want to randomize that, right? So that, hey, you could go back to that old fortress that you played through the first time and something fucking crazy happened and now that's an ambush or something, or that kind of thing, right? So that was always the ultimate goal. Then we wanted the retention elements from Diablo. And then I generally, because we wanted to finally make games that people play for a longer time, right? Because with Ori, I was always a little bit depressed when we've worked for 4 years on a game, and then the game comes out, and then all the hardcore people play through it in like 15 hours, and then they never touch it again, right?
Done,
and you're like, let's go another 4 years, to do that thing in 15 hours. The other thing was just inspired by, I had an idea of what ARPG should become back when I first played Diablo 2 with my best friend. And I just wanted to basically have a world that I could live in, right? And by the way, I think that's something that even Blizzard North back then still wanted to do with the BattleNet town. I think Sacrament and what it is now and what it will be now with multiplayer is probably pretty close to the vision of what Blizzard North wanted to still put into Diablo 2 with the BattleNet towns. Because it's basically a town that you share with others and where you meet and talk to one another and then, decide to go on journeys and that kind of thing. So that was basically the elevator pitch. A pretty fucking long elevator pitch, but that's how I explained it.
I was going to say, it's always hard for me to kind of describe the game because I'm like, yeah, they say it's an ARPG, but you're not going to see that it's an RPG until you start like getting crazy builds together. You're going to very much feel like it's more of like a Souls-like because the combat is weighty and it's intentional, but then also the level design feels like something that you'd find in like a premier kind of Souls game, right? Like you've got all of the shortcuts where they're supposed to be, you've got your rest spots where you can go back to town where they should be. So it feels like that. But then I'm like, but then you can make a build that you can press a button a couple times and delete a boss instantly. So it's not totally that Souls-like experience. You do have the ARPG.
I find that discussion endlessly fascinating anyway, right? Because if you look at it looks like you guys are all probably younger than me, but when I played Diablo 1,
thank you.
Well, I don't know. I'm 41.
I don't hear that
you guys all look a lot younger than 41.
Same age group.
Okay.
Well, I'm pushing 40 now, man.
I'm 30.
But then you guys will remember that, right? So when Diablo 1 first came out, right? it wasn't like it was a completely different game than the ARPGs that you play today, right? It wasn't spammy at all. It was the opposite, right? Like it was basically, I wouldn't say a top-down Dark Souls, right? But it was extremely restrained in terms of like how it played. And I would argue even Diablo 2, right? Like from level, 1 to 40, 50, or 60 or something, right? It plays a certain way. And the funny thing is, I recently watched all these interviews from David Brevik, right? Like the actual creator of Diablo, actually stating that he didn't like what happened to the ARPG, right? Because basically what Blizzard did was that they took the endgame experience, right, where the maths, like the scaling was already fucking crazy, right? And like you literally blast the entire screen and all of that, right? And Blizzard kind of like made that the norm with Diablo 3, right? And it's now we have games where it's like, okay, I reached level 60 in like 3-4 hours or something, right? And that was a very different that's just a very different experience than what ARPGs used to be, right? So when we first marketed No Rest for the Wicked, I went out and said it's an ARPG, right? But what I didn't quite get was that for some reason ARPG suddenly meant no, it's a Diablo-like, and meaning it plays like PoE or Diablo 3, right?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. And there's a huge community that just gave us all kinds of shit, right? Because I was basically saying we want to make the best ARPG, right? And they felt attacked or whatever, But that's the thing with, like I think ARPG is a pretty big term that covers a lot of things. I would argue that Dark Souls is an ARPG, right? It is an action game that has RPG elements in it. But yeah, it's strange. Like, I even had an interview with Ciceran where he made the argument that that ARPGs and action RPGs are not the same thing, right?
Yeah, totally. You say someone
semantics.
ARPG, they mean like Diablo. If you say it's an action role-playing game, they're like, oh, it's like
Right.
like
Carries a different
Souls
nuance.
or like Stellar Blade, and Wukong. Any of these kind of games would be like
even though it
action.
means the same thing.
It's the same thing, but it's not. It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
It
that's
seems
why I
like a lot
people
of the
that-
inspiration for like No Rest for the Wicked came from like yourself and love for ARPGs. Like, how was that pitch to like Moon? Was everyone like, wait, you want to go from Ori to like a top-down Dark Souls?
No,
like
what happened is that I made the pitch to Moon and how I won the team over that Wicked should become the next project that we're doing. Is that I always saw Ori as our Mario, right? Because it's a 2D side-scrolling game with like lots of platforming, right? So I made the analogy that this is like our Mario game, right? And then the pitch was, guys, what if we make Zelda? Then that's kind of like how it started. Then I sat down, made a prototype, and we liked that prototype. And it always had like huge potential because I put all this crazy shit in, right? Like the prototype had even stuff that you don't even see in Wicked yet, right? Like I even had things like, oh, here's a little tower defense thing, right? Which was super fun. And that's what we are working towards, right? Like there was always this idea of like, for some reason, if I put this little character into a top-down world, suddenly I can put all these mechanics in, right? And that I really love as a challenge, right? That we can have, the combat needs to be really good, but then like that you can do tons of other things, right? That you can do, and when you're in town, how about farming mechanics and so on, right? That you could literally have a farm like in Stardew Valley, right? And almost play it like a cozy game and so on, right? And yeah, there's just so much potential. We could do that tower defense thing, right? We could do we already introduced in the Crucible that roguelite mode. And we even we almost got the other version out that the other statue done. Watts will love that, which is basically a survivor style challenge, right? Where it's like, hey, literally, like there's tons and tons of enemies coming in, and you level up very quickly, and then you pick a boon like very, very quickly, and then you build your character that way, and so on, right? There's other things that we're doing there, like, hey, literally, when you start, your character gets reset back to level 1, and you just have the ARPG experience of leveling a character from 1 to 99, but in like an hour, right? In that kind of time frame. So there's lots of crazy shit that we want to do, where we want to innovate and challenge the industry, right? And where we can think we can do things there that hasn't really been done yet, and that's just super exciting.
So
One of
with
my-
you,
Oh, you
no,
go ahead.
you go.
Are you sure? Okay.
Yes.
I was gonna say, like you said, you're talking about innovation. One of the things that obviously I think the others would agree that stands out about No Rest is the aesthetic that you chose. Like,
Mhm.
what was the inception point? Where did that come from? Because even just like the character models have such a unique look that it's visually striking. It stands out. It's distinct. It doesn't look like anything else that's out there right now. When I make my character and I've got like, it's kind of like low to the ground, thick thighs. Where did that aesthetic come from? What was the inception point there?
Well, in terms of that art direction, that comes from Michael, our art director, who's just. I mean, I worked at Blizzard, right? But that guy is the best artist I've ever worked with. Like, he's just an insane person. Like, he's literally just a machine. You can ask him something, right? Like, hey, I need an NPC that has this and this job, has this character, should look like this. And like literally 3-4 hours later, he comes back to you with like, okay, Thomas, I created 12 concepts. Do you like these? And like literally everything is like a masterpiece, right? They like, he's nuts. And that was his style, right? Like, he always had these characters that have like, that look a little bit different. And I personally, I always liked it, right? It gives it a very different touch. But there are some people out there who just generally, if you don't do photorealism, bad, right?
Yeah.
And I don't care, like I really like when you fully deck out a character and so on, what that looks like and the style behind it. The other reason why we're picking the art style that we do is because, well, we don't have the same amount of resources that other studios do, right? And I applied a pretty simple trick, right? Like, I always looked at, when I was still at Blizzard, right? I remember Uncharted 2 came out and I was just blown away, right? Like, it just looked like not $1 million. It looked like $100 million, right? Like, it looked amazing. But if you look at Uncharted 2 today, it's fucking ugly, right? Simply because tech has gotten much better, right? And like, now we look at Unreal Engine 5 humans versus that, and it's just, okay, this doesn't hold up. It looks very dated, right? And well, the thing that I always loved, right? And this was also the thing for Ori, we always went with a painted style because if you look at those old 2D games, they still look pretty great, right? They didn't age that badly, right? And then if you go to the museum and you look at a fucking Caravaggio painting or something, right? Or even some, Michelangelo stuff and so on, right? Like, it doesn't age.
It
looks as good today as it looked 500 years ago, right? So there is something in our brains about like, hey, these paintings still hold up, right? And so we're trying to apply similar styles. And we try to have a very distinct style, right? Like, Caravaggio had that light dark thing, and that's also what I've always tried to copy to a certain degree, right? Like, you always see the contrast in any Moon Studio game to go from very light and vibrant to very dark, like, immediately, right? And that gives you that thing of like, hey, if I give you a postage stamp size screenshot of No Rest for the Wicked, you will still say that, you will still be able to say that that's our game, simply because it has that style.
I love it personally. I think it looks great. I was constantly stopping, especially in the Breach where you've got like the waterfalls and the rivers, and I'm stopping every second to be like, oh, gotta take a picture of that. It looks really good. I love it.
That'll be really neat in once multiplayer comes along, right? Because these vista shots, like, that's already pretty impressive. It's so much cooler if you then have, oh, but my buddy is down there, behind there on the windmill, right? And you literally see him climbing up like 500 miles in the distance.
Right. And I think you come out with a strong first impression on the ship itself. The opening sequence, I think, is a strong opening impression about what to expect about the aesthetic of the game, and I think it sticks the landing.
Well, thank you.
Definitely.
Maybe real fast, the game released in early access at $40. You're talking about, well, you've already added content. There's more to come. How much of that is balancing, fixing bugs, listening to the community, and how much is there's more content coming? And in other words, will this remain a $40 experience in full release? And how much are you adding?
No, we've been always very open about this, right? Like, we have our price right now, which is $40 in early access. We thought that, hey, that's a reduced price from your typical full price game. And we just want to make that feel like, okay, that's a steal, right? For the amount of content and the amount of hours that people get right now, right? So Right now, based on our data, what we are seeing is that for complete playthroughs, people already spend about 50 to 70 hours, which I think is fair. If you pay $40 and you
Yeah.
get 50 to 70 hours out of it, and that's if you don't play any alt characters, right? If you only basically play one class, right? I think that's a pretty fair price. But obviously, yes, there's more stuff coming. Like, we are basically using early access in the way that I think it should be used, where we have it out there. We look at all the data. How are people playing the game? What do they like? What do they not like? And we're really trying to perfect it, right? Like, we're really trying to kind of like find this perfect formula. And then the idea is, well, right now we released a huge amount of content. We basically doubled the size of the game and added tons and tons of stuff and new systems and so on, right? The next things that we're going to do is we're going to add even more systems and things that allow you to replay the game, right? So right now, people really like the quest that we have there, but we don't have that many side quests yet, right? So that's a big thing that's going to come, right? So that you always have multiple choices, right? Like, you always have tons of things to do. And like, hey, if you don't like to do this current thing, you should have like tons of other side quests that you could do and activities that you can do and so on. So that's one thing. But generally, just making the world super interactive is important to us. The farming is coming in now. The co-op is the next big thing that's actually launching. So we're basically, like, working on that right now, that we just make sure the multiplayer releases as fast as possible, because I think that's going to be a pretty big game changer for most people. And then after that, we still have to kind of like finish up all the combat stuff, right? While I'm pretty happy with combat, there's still, like, it's pretty hard to create the best combat system on the market. And I think there's still quite a few things that From Software does better than us. And I want to fix that, right? Like, ultimately, I want people to objectively be able to say, Wicked has the best combat system on the market. It's the best, like, that's just the thing. So there's still quite a lot of stuff that I want to do there, and also just introduce new weapon archetypes and so on. We have a lot of crazy shit in planning, and then we also want to expand the Crucible and so on. Right? Meanwhile, with that, obviously our guys are working on a huge like content update already. I actually posted the size of the world that we have on Discord, right? And people can look at that, and it's pretty big, right? So we're trying to just fill all that in and so on. And once we hit that, like, we'll release our 1.0, and that's the idea. We basically are just following the same formula that Larian laid out, right? Where you use the early access and are okay with taking the hits, right? Like, make yourself vulnerable. Oh, the game is not perfect, but it's out there because you need to have it out there because it's so complex, and you need to look at how things work at its scale. So we are okay with taking some hits here and there. But then we use early access for that. And then once it comes out, we want it to be just, okay, this is clearly a masterpiece. This is clearly Game of the Year. Everything should just hide because this is it.
Right. Well, you were talking about getting a bunch of data from early access. Is there anything that really surprised you? Whether that's like, we should really change this, or whether that's like, we should double down on this feature because everyone loved it? Like, is there something that stood out from early access?
I mean, I don't want to be mean, but I'm going to say something now.
Do it.
The thing I've seen on recent playtests, and when we look at the data, right, is that I absolutely thought that something like our attribute system, is just standard and has been for quite so many games, right? And we've seen so many players who just didn't get it. And then we're frustrated and blamed the game and all of that, right? And we just, frankly, the thing is, we are in early access. We don't have all the tutorials in the game yet. So not everything is like super deeply explained. So, but we saw a lot of players that basically have a strength weapon, right? Wield a two-handed greatsword, and then wonder why they're not dealing that much damage. And it's because, well, they put all the points into dexterity and not into strength, right? Even though the UI shows you when you put points into an attribute, like, here, if you put it in strength, the damage goes up. And if you put in dex, the damage does not go up here. And and then, I mean, you could make the argument that Dark Souls did it better, right? But the way Dark Souls did it is that the attribute points just matter way less, right? Like our weighing is just different. And there's this other thing, right? Like Dark Souls also gives you multiple things per attribute. And we don't do that because it's just even more ammunition to have players end up with crazy bad builds, right? Like, here's my mage and I gave it a bunch of strength so I can have better armor, and then but you will never be able to play the end game because you put way too many points into strength, right? That kind of thing. So I am actually reworking that system. But the other thing that we're seeing where we really overestimated things is that, I swear to God, I haven't actually looked at the number, but the tutorial time, right? Like, how long do people actually have the tutorial screen up? If a tutorial is there, I swear to God, it must be like 0.2 seconds or something. Like, it's just, it's completely useless. It's completely useless to have that text there and explain something, right? Because people are just mashing. And the thing with a developer, right, where you then groan is like, oh my God, like that person is now, like, 2 minutes later, he's frustrated and hates the experience. And says, oh, but that was never explained, right? And it's like literally 2 minutes before he just skipped away, like he bashed away the tutorial box that explained that particular mechanic.
This is why developers are making you hold buttons to take it off.
That's
so
right.
you have to be like,
Sure.
I am making the conscious effort to not read this.
Yes.
I may have done this on stream yesterday.
Tutorials are really tough. Like, you don't want to bore
he's really bad
people.
for it.
Yeah. And that's
Mahler.
Okay.
but would you say that's the trick?
I think just generally people don't want to read in video games. And by the way, I'm the same, right? Like, I always go into games with the assumption of, like, I don't need your stupid tutorials. I'm a game developer. So, and then I run into the same issues, right? So I don't want to blame people, right? But it's just, like, Wicked is an extremely complex game. There's so many mechanics and so on already in the game, right? And if you skip that stuff, you might just not understand something and then have to read it up on a wiki or ask a question or something, right? But those are the things that we're seeing.
Could add a warning in.
I would like to defend myself because I skipped a tutorial box yesterday in Division 2. And I said this, I was like, it doesn't make sense to me yet to have all the text. I'd rather you give me the crafting, like, make me craft something as a tutorial. You give me the, like, starting stuff and let me do it, because I need to see the UI. Because when I see the text box out of context, like, I don't know what this is going to look like until I actually
that is always the better experience, right? Like, that's what I did in Ori, for example. But Ori was a much simpler game, right? So I'll give you a good example. In Ori, when I introduced double jump, I always had you like, oh, you jump into a room that you can't get out of anymore, right? And then I give you the double jump, and then the only way to get out of that room is by doing some of the double jump challenges, right? And now only if you do a double jump thing, you get out of the room. Now, that's great. That's the way to do it, right? But, like, if I would do that with Wicked, there's like, okay, there's 300 game mechanics that I have to explain to you, right? I can't throw you into 300 rooms and explain every single one. You know, it's difficult.
You
I feel
could.
like
You
some
could
of the
make the
Wii era-
Crucible a bunch of rooms where it's like tutorial rooms. Here, we're gonna teach you how to do this.
I feel like some of the Wii era Zeldas fell into this trap where the tutorials would go on for 6 hours, and, like, you'd almost get bored of the game before you even started it, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Where do you think the line is between just letting players figure it out and that being part? Because lots of games do that, right? Like, we're not going to give you all the information. You're going to have to work it out yourself. You're going to have to watch YouTube videos. You're going to have to ask questions. Like, where do you draw that line between developer helping the player understand the systems and letting the player work it out themselves and just presenting it some sort of challenge?
Yeah. By the way, that is a thing that I think definitely has changed with generations, right? Like, so back in the day, I remember buying SimCity for my MS-DOS PC, right? And it shipped with a fucking 400-page manual, right? And you read that manual,
heavy.
you know, and like, I remember being on the bus ride home and I read that manual and I wanted to know everything about it, right? And I really engaged with the game even before I had it installed and so on. And what we saw now in Wicked, for example, right? We got so many complaints that that people, like, we have these healing mechanics in the game, and one of them is consumables, that you literally, like, hey, I grab a bunch of mushrooms and then I make a mushroom soup, and then that's what I use to heal myself. And then people got very angry with us with like, okay, I want to try bosses again and again and again. And I'm running out of consumables. So every fifth or sixth time I have to go out and find some consumables, right? And well, even if you have different mechanics in the game already, even if you have something like, here's a heal spell, where you literally have the same thing that how healing works in Ori and the Will of the Wisps or in Hollow Knight or that kind of thing, right? But that required you to actually go to the Enchantress in town and look at the spells that she has, right? And I think even that, like, I think in the past, if Wicked would have released like 15 years ago, you wouldn't have had to tutorialize that. People would have just done it and figured it out and have done their thing, right? But we live in TikTok times, right? Where it's just, there's no way. Like, nobody figures it out, right? So we're actually changing that now. We're making sure that people have both things right at the start, just so it's totally 100% clear.
And it's an interesting evolution. You know, I mean, you're talking about that. My very first thought was like, Skyrim is one of the most successful games of all time. And if you're a spellcaster, you don't just get spells. You have to go to specific vendors in the cities and see their their spell tome stock and buy those things. It's like you have to go out of your way to find them. But we did that back then. We talked to all the NPCs. We saw what they all had to offer. And that was, it's interesting, you referenced like the manual on the bus. For me, when I was growing up, that was like if mom was going to Walmart to buy something, I'd go to the electronics section. And what did we do? We went straight to the like game guidebooks that were this thick. And you'd spend your whole time your mom's shopping, going through the game guide, trying to learn where all these items were. And I think that was a bigger part of it, was just figuring it out. But you're right, a lot of gamers these days have a shorter attention spans. We're used to being given the things.
It's just generally, I remember playing Zelda 1, right, in school, and that game is like just obtuse as shit, right? Like there's secrets in every single screen. But if you give a kid today Zelda 1, holy shit, will they be frustrated, right? There's nothing being explained in the game, and you had to talk to your friends, right? Like, and hey, Steve, did you play Zelda 1 yesterday? Yeah, or Nintendo Power or something, right? Like, I can't find the 5th dungeon. Where is that, right? And like people figured it out together. It was almost a community event, right? These days, we don't really have that anymore, right? Like even my son now, he's 7 years old, and when he plays something and gets stuck or something, right, he immediately asks me, "Hey, Papa, can you look up YouTube where that is?" Right? Like it doesn't even appeal to him that it's like, hey, no, just figure it out, right? Like just run around a bunch of times, try to really explore it by yourself. And to some degree, I think that's a bit sad, right? Because the immediate reaction is always like, if I face any resistance, immediately go to the internet and find the solution, right? And I think there's a little bit, there's a certain level of creativity with just, no, I'm just gonna fuck around and I'm just gonna, figure it out myself,
Yeah.
It's funny, I had this conversation yesterday on stream where I was like, I'm president, all guides are banned. You can't have, no guides are being written, no YouTube videos.
Like, I am voting for the other guy, Watts.
I said the same thing. I was like, back in the day, I would go and talk to my friend about it. We'd go even on forums, right, where you're talking with other humans to figure it out, not just being like, as soon as you have any resistance, you go and look it up and there's your answer. Like people can't make their own builds anymore.
You would
they can't
ban
find
yellow
solutions. Yellow paint's better than guides.
Right.
I think, like you said, it's sad because it's not just like that people aren't figuring it out, and I do think that's kind of sad. But you're also losing a part of community when it comes to games, and now you can just like be alone and just look it up, and you don't.
The thing that I always found atrocious. I remember when Peter Molyneux talked in Fable 2, right? They introduced that thing that line that literally tells you exactly where to go, right? Like, oh, you want to finish a quest? Here you go. Just follow that line, right? Because it's like they probably saw in user research that, oh, people get, like they stumble around and so on, right? And they explore too much, right? Like we want them to actually get to the stuff. But it's like there's a certain amount of people being lost, right? And that kind of thing. That is okay, even if they seem frustrated, right? Did you even check what their feeling is when you actually solve the issue afterwards, right? Because I can't imagine how miserable it probably would have been to put Dark Souls when it first came out, or Demon Souls back then, right, into playtesting, into your user research session, right? Because you would have just seen people dying to bosses like 500 times, right? And like you would have been told this is a shitty game, right? But that moment, and we had that, by the way, with Ori, right? Like we always at Moon made games they're difficult, right? Like I always from Microsoft got the feedback that, hey, Ori looks so cute and great, right? And we want everybody to play it, even the kids, right? Like, can you just reduce everything by 50% or something, right? Like, can you just reduce the difficulty? And I was always resisting that because we grew up with fucking playing Ghosts and Goblins, you know, and that kind
Grew
of
up with
thing.
Lion King, which beat my ass.
Right.
Yes.
You're not
But there
wrong.
is there's a certain, like, if you then beat something by yourself, right? In a game, like a lot of times in real life, you don't get these kind of challenges, right? You don't get a lot of these things where you can actually succeed at something, right? So I think for a lot of people, that's what they get in video games, right? That they're good at it or become good at it, and then they get their kick out of, you know, I didn't have a good day, but I beat fucking Margit finally, and I feel like $1 million, and everything is good, you know? And that's like, I mean, literally for Ori, for example, right? There's literal YouTube videos out there, right? Where people die 80, 90 times on the first big dungeon on the Chinsu tree, right? But the moment they do it, they throw the controller in the air, they scream, they stand up, they shout, they're like, "Oh my god, I finally did it!" Right? And it's the best moment of their lives, right? Like so.
Yeah.
I
You
think
talked
that
about
those are
your-
really important moments in games.
No doubt. You talked about your inspiration, like what if we made our Zelda, you know what I mean? And I remember when I was a kid, freaking Ocarina of Time Water Temple. How long was I stuck in there? But when you figured it out and you got through, you're like, oh, I broke through the dam, you know, and
Yeah,
That's
that
why
Exactly.
escaping from the water in Ori was trouble for a lot of people.
yeah, there's no replacing that feeling. Like, I'm definitely with you on the like.
Totally
Ori,
agree.
Everyone
Ori
sort of
was-
has that ADD now of like, I'll just look it up. And you want to play a lot of games, and I think that ecosystem is valid. Like, I find myself being like, oh, well, if I had all the time in the world and there wasn't a list of 10 game of the years I want to play, like my
Right.
thinking has definitely changed. Like, I would gladly spend all this time, but I'm like, there's a difference between playing. Like, Ori is the example I often like. I'm playing, and it sort of delights you with this sudden, like, oh, that's what it's trying to tell me. I mean, Super
Yeah.
Metroid, the super jump boots. That's the
Mhm.
moment that I literally as a child had a revelation of, holy crap, this is so incredible. They just taught me something without all the text, and so I always love that.
Yeah, with the little animal doing it, and then if you repeat
Yes.
it, it's like, oh, I
yeah,
figured it out.
I was a child and understood that it was trying to teach me something. It effectively did it, and I actually had this magical. It's one of my favorite games of all time because I had a moment as a child, like,
Right,
holy
yeah.
crap,
You
it's
latch onto
teaching
that
me.
feeling, yeah.
And who gets
Yeah.
excited about getting taught something as a child, right?
Right. Well,
So-
but it's different because when we were kids, we got video games at Christmas and on our birthdays, and that was it. But nowadays,
Right.
it's like, what are you playing this month and next
Right.
month and the month
And it
after
is
that?
is different. And maybe real fast on the, I know this is a big topic right now. So on player frustration, you're in early access, you're asking, give us your feedback. So they go to Steam and they go to the review section and suddenly they're bombing the game. That's like one of the only places this happens. So what I would ask, number one, is what do you think Steam should do to accept player feedback, especially in early access, versus this review system?
I don't have anything against the Steam review system. I think the Steam review system in itself is pretty great, right? Where I've grown though is when the system is being abused, right? And we just had that situation to a certain degree. So here's what happened, right? So we released the breach, and I mean, what's played it, right? Like we overtuned it, right? Simply because what happened was I was so focused on I want to get as much content in there as possible, because the major criticism that people had when we initially released was there's not enough content. It shows a ton of promise, but there should be more content, right? So I just wanted to get as much stuff in it as possible. And I felt like we had it pretty well tuned a while ago, right? Like 2 months ago, 3 months ago or so. And then I gave the entire team the directive. Let's make sure we fix every bug. Let's make sure we all playtest like crazy, right? And we write anything up that isn't fun to us and so on, right? And Well, our team played the game now for hundreds of hours, right? So their feedback was, oh, I didn't have fun during this challenge, during this boss, because it wasn't challenging enough, right? And well, Elden Ring is known for being super challenging, and that's doing really well, right? So I think in many ways we just overtuned the shit out of it, right? Like not because we are evil or something, right? But because like they played it, they didn't really enjoy it, simply because it was too easy for them, and so they overtuned it, right? And then we released it, and people lost their minds, right? Because they just got killed left and right. And with Wicked, the other thing is when you play it, it's a different game, right? Like it's not like Diablo or Dark Souls. Like in Dark Souls, you very much play it fairly linearly, right? Like first I'm in this area and I'm completing this area, then I kill the boss, then I go to the next area. Then I'm completing this area, I kill the boss, I go to the next area, right? In Wicked, it's more like, no, you live in that world. Yeah. And you come to Sacrament, and then like, hey, you can go to the next area, but you can also go back and do some weeklies or bounties or anything that you want, right? You might, before you go out, want to get more materials and like upgrade your gear and those kind of things, right? So I think a lot of people played Breach with the mindset of, oh, this should play exactly like Diablo, or it should play exactly like Souls, because that's what I played recently, without necessarily giving us the chance of like, but we're not making Diablo or Souls, we're making No Rest for the Wicked. And then quite a few reviews were that, right? That it was just A, it was overtuned, and B, it was, oh, this doesn't play like Diablo, so I don't like it, right? So that's a bit weird. The other thing, like, but that feedback and that kind of stuff, like, I'm A-okay with that, right? But the other thing that happened to us, and this has been ongoing now for a while, is that I did see on Twitter quite a few of the bigger, I don't know what to call them, right? But some activists or whatever, right? They basically literally asked their community, hey, give this game a negative review because Thomas Mahler is a Nazi, right? And I'm like, this is so stupid. Like, basically what happened to us is that 3 years ago, we had some really nutty journalist, right? And I'll use quote unquote, write this horrendous story about us. And by the way, 12 years before that, you never heard anything but positive stuff about Moon Studios, right? Because we were the team that made the 2 Ori games, and suddenly there's this journalist guy that called us Nazis and sexists and racists and so on, based on nothing. Based on we had to lay off 2 people because they brought friction into the team, and he interviewed them, and hurrah, they said some crazy stuff about us, right? And since then, we're constantly getting attacked by people that just repeat that stuff, right? That read the headline and immediately throw us into the thing of like, well, you guys are a bunch of Nazis, I'm going to downvote everything that you do and so on. And so what I saw is, well, that actually happened, right? So there's, people that call for negative reviews. And then I looked at the Steam reviews, and there's Steam reviews where the person literally puts in a dot and gives a negative review, and that's it. Yeah. Right? And it's like, that's crappy. And the other thing was like, on Steam, I didn't even know that that's possible, but on Steam, you can buy a game, give a negative review by posting nothing, putting just a sign, some sign in there, and then leaving a negative review, and then you refund the game.
So,
right.
So that was really the question. If there's this permanent system, we saw it with Helldivers, right? You have a community that likes your game or loves your game, but when you turn it in a different direction, even when it's in full release, suddenly they leave another permanent review that they hate it. It's very binary, actually, is what I witnessed. And so that, again, was my question here of like, with all of this ability to leave like a permanent arrow to the knee in Moon Studios, right? Do you think Steam is doing a good job in handling that? Would you want a better system?
I think the industry generally has to adapt, right? And I think that just takes some time, right? Because for 30, 40 years or so, the system never changed, right? It was basically every product was a boxed product, right? And it was just, once it comes out, a reviewer leaves a review, and that's it, right? Because like the updates that come out or the patches and so on don't really drastically change the game, right? But in the last 10 years or so, right, we've seen lots of games that are under insane development that become completely different games.
Cyberpunk.
Yeah, or any of these things, right? And what's happening there is like, hey, you have a review, that, for example, the Metacritic or OpenCritic or whatever review that is up there, right, is like, that's literally reviewing a game that does not exist anymore, but that review will exist forever, right? Like that
Yeah.
stats on a 7 or something, right? And it's like, okay, literally, if you read that stuff, like all the criticism that was there, we already fixed. And the game that is being reviewed there, that doesn't exist. You cannot even play that, right? So who is helped by having that, right? Like that thing out there. But I think that's just a long, things like that just take a long time to change, right? Like if an industry was a certain way for 40 years and then something changes, even if it's already, hey, we're 10 years in with like live service games or like just games that are under live development and that constantly change and so on, like these, like a press just doesn't really have an outlet to say, okay, well, these games have changed. Let's actually come back and like we'll review that, right? So I don't know. It's a difficult problem.
Yeah, I've always thought
I think-
about like with early access specifically, maybe there could be a different way of doing it with Steam reviews because the game isn't fully out. So there's going to be patches all the time. That's the point of early access, is that there's going to be constant patches, so things are going to be constantly changing. So it would be nice if there was a way to kind of separate the reviews from early access, so there's still a way for people to give feedback maybe via that system, even though maybe it's not the best system to do that, but separate that from here's 1.0, this is a live game, this is like more of a finished product, because they're going to be so different. Someone who played the very first iteration of that game and left a negative review, it could even be a different genre by the time the game comes out. Like, it could be so different.
Yeah, it could be completely different. But I mean, on the other hand, you could make the argument, right, that there have been lots of early access scams, right? And so if you pay money to a developer, you do want to have some outlet to leave some comment on like, hey, I think this was a scam. The developer didn't hold up their promises. They didn't develop the things that they said, right? Like, so it's just a really complex problem to solve. But I do think like there should be a timeout on, okay, if a review is really old, then and if nobody's helped by this anymore, right? Like, does that matter, right? Like, does that still matter? Because you still have reviews that are like 6 years old on Path of Exile, and it's literally like that game changes every 3 months.
That's
like
a good idea. Maybe like a
old
weighted
review is
system
completely nonsense.
where
Yeah.
newer
Yeah,
reviews would affect the like total review score better than older reviews, even though
I think that would be a smart idea.
That would be
yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah, but
rated on the
Maybe, but then you invalidate maybe just if your game has not completely changed, it would invalidate stuff that was maybe a good review. Like
Still
I come from a
useful.
review
Like I've
background,
bought games
so-
on Steam that were old and they no longer run on the current version of Windows.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
it'd be
I mean,
nice-
so yeah, I don't want to spend too much time, but yeah,
Yeah.
like I have a lot of review background, so quite frankly, whether it's early access or not, I hate to see using like a moment to give feedback on a change in balance to I fully hate your game, so like we've seen it in Helldivers recently, we've seen it. It's definitely an effective tool to get the company's attention. So on that front, I'm like, hey, it's working. But from
it did positive things, right? Like like I recently had that chat with that guy called Legendary Drops, right? And it did help with Helldivers 2, right? But Sony was doing this thing with like, hey, it's not available in 180 countries or something, right? And it forced Sony to change their thing, which ultimately was positive, right? The thing that is though a little bit like, I would just want people to be reasonable, right? Because the thing with us is like
You're asking too much.
a smaller independent developer, right? And if you try to apply the same rule set here, right? Like, and that's what I kind of like wanted to say with that, right? Like, so for a big publisher, right? Like, people knew if they review Bomb Helldivers 2, Sony is not going to cancel the game. It's super successful. It's already out there. There's Sony in the background and so on, right? But if you do that to us, we are a small indie studio, and if we don't see any sales, right? Like, at some point we'll be dead, right? So that's what I wanted to say. I think people kind of like saw it as like, I'm trying to guilt trip people into something, right? I just tried to make a logical statement that because there isn't a party in the background that pays all the bills, right? Like, if you just review Bombas, and if that situation doesn't change at some point, like that, the Steam reviews have a dramatic effect on sales. And if we don't ever have sales, well, we will we'll be out of business at some point.
Yeah.
It's why I always try to drive home like how important reviewing, especially indie games, is, and wish listing, because that's going to be the thing that enables people to see the game. And I just try and bring it up like whenever I can. Of like with every game, definitely do it. Like leave your thoughts and wish lists if you're interested, but especially with indie games because it's like night and day the
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, to
It's
finish
a
point, I was
huge
just gonna
difference
say that
because most people just go on Steam and just look at, how much is the game and what's the review score,
It's a
right?
very
And based on
positive.
that, you make your decision. That's it, right?
Yeah, and it affects the algorithm. And all I was going to say is you actually have
Yes.
said you want the feedback. It's valuable to your team,
Absolutely.
but you have a problem that you're like, please be careful with the review. And that's my point. Steam, and now we're going down the path of like AI recommendation. Are you sure this is not a patch review or whatever? I
Yeah.
was leading, but I would love to see Steam and other companies encourage tons of feedback, but make it clear what a review is and separate those things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Tough thing to solve, huh?
I mean, maybe we are the first thing that makes them think about it, right? Because it brought up a situation, right? I mean, and also every now and then we talk to the guys at Valve, and we know some people that worked at, like we had some people that worked for us and now work at Valve, right? They're all wickedly smart, right? So I don't really want to feel like, hey, I'm giving them tons of advice, right? Because they're like, what's the chance that if I come up with some advice that they haven't discussed this for 1,000 hours already internally,
Yeah. I think the bit of hope with this kind of stuff is you've seen games, I mean, they are bigger studios, like Cyberpunk and, well, I guess No Man's Sky, that started off very rough, but continued to support the game, continued to update, and like word of mouth was enough to like overpower Steam reviews, even outdated Steam reviews or negative, and to push them back into, positive. And the same with like Helldivers. I think it shows you, because people are review bombing. I think it's like part of the equation too. Like I think people are aware of like review bombing now, and when you see something that's very mixed, you do try to gather the story. And I think, as a studio, you're doing the right thing now is to make sure that your side of the story is heard as well. So it's not just what's written on Steam. And then
You also have
as
to
long
be
as
careful with the term review bombing, right? Because as some people
Yeah.
laid it out as like,
True.
I'm saying every
True.
review that is on Steam that is negative is review bombing, right?
Yeah.
What I see as review bombing is like if there's literally people just telling others, give this game a negative review for whatever reason that doesn't have anything to do with the game, right?
Mm.
That to me would fall into review
Yeah.
bombing, right? If people
Yeah.
just play your game and don't like your game, well, that's fair game, right? That will always happen. Like it's impossible for me to make a game that just pleases completely everybody, right? Like there will always
And you
be
wouldn't
people
want
that
to.
just prefer some other thing. No, it's just,
Yeah.
like I make a certain thing, right? And if I make chocolate pudding, right, I'll very much endear the chocolate pudding lovers, but somebody who's more into ice cream, like I'm sorry, but I might disappoint you, even though chocolate pudding is fantastic.
Because we're coming up to the hour here, I wanted to kind of ask about like when it comes to 1.0. One, how are you thinking in terms of like the Nintendo Switch? Because there's a Nintendo Switch 2. Are you kind of looking into that at all? We
Yeah.
have a lot of people waiting for console. They're very excited. And then because you guys are perfectionists, do you have a point in mind that you can see in your site where you're like, that's when we will be happy to go into 1.0?
I think it depends on a bunch of things, right? Like we also have to see how is Breach doing, how is Co-op doing, and so on. We would like to just really perfect it, right? But we do have a release date in mind that isn't as far off as some people think. Because the thing that happened with us is that you have to remember that we already worked on Wicked, like it went into actual production in 2018.
Wow.
So there's a lot of stuff that we already worked on that we basically just have to finish, right? Where it's like, hey, here's like I'll let you in on a little secret. The areas for 1.0 that we are gonna ship, they're already designed.
Awesome.
They were basically done at some point, right? The question is, well, they haven't been touched in a while now. You have to clean those up again and take a look, and like, hey, a life system has to be adapted to them and so on, right? But we have a lot of stuff still that has already been done that we basically just have to package up and ship, right? And so on. So I think we're looking pretty good there. Regarding Switch, well, we just talked to Nintendo and we are very interested. The thing that like I always want to look at hardware in like, can we do something really interesting with that hardware, right?
Mm.
And like we still have to wait for the dev kits. But one of the things that I discussed with them that I would really like to do is to solve the problem of couch co-op ultimately, right? Because the problem that you have with an ARPG and couch co-op is that Diablo 3, for example, allowed 4-player couch co-op, right? The problem was, well, if you bring up the menu, it takes over the entire screen, right? So every time somebody wants to change their inventory, 3 other players have to wait. And it's like, that's an awful experience, right?
Yeah.
The way they solve this now in Diablo 4 and in Path of Exile is, well, we only allow 2 players anymore, right? But now the inventory is like the first player takes up half of that screen of the left side and the other player takes up half of the right side, right? But it's like, well, that's kind of shitty, right? Because if you look at families and so on, I grew up with 2 brothers, right? So we always had me, my 2 brothers, and a friend being over. And if we couldn't have played a game with 4 players, that would have been really shitty for us, right?
Yeah.
And I want families and so on to play that, right? So I want to look into that game share thing that they have and so on. And I think it would be really cool if we could do something completely different there, right? Where we solve that problem of, I want people to play with 4, like I would want 4-player support at some point. And by the way, I'm not saying couch co-op absolutely ships to 1.0, right? That's on our wish list, but we'll have to see. But I would want to solve that problem. That seems really intriguing to me. And that's something that you could do on a Switch too, because it has some crazy stuff that I don't know if other developers will use it that way.
So instead of pulling out the menu, maybe just pulls up a QR code. And then they can just do it on their phones. Who's not
You need
using
the
phones
No
these
Rest for the
days?
Wicked mobile app for your inventory.
Yeah, so you hit the
Like
menu, it
Zelda.
just flashes a QR code, pull up your phone, you're managing your inventory here, it doesn't take over the screen. Easy.
No, I have some ideas on how this could be solved, but I'm not going to share everything right now.
I wouldn't share it now.
I'll bill you for that idea. It's fine.
Sounds like you want to see a Switch 2 version of the game, though. Yeah.
We will release it on every platform. I can already say that, right? So at 1.0, the idea with Wicked has always been that we almost want to basically build a platform, right? Like I want people to be able to play it on PC and then go to the Switch and keep continuing the exact same game that they just played. I would even want them to be able to whip out their phone and like just play the exact same game, right? That kind of thing. So that it's just, if you are No Rest for the Wicked player, you can access your thing on everywhere.
I love that. Awesome. Well, I think we're pretty good here. I know Briar's got to head out kind of soon, and we don't want to keep you around forever. You got lots of work to do. Is there anything that you'd want to hit on before we head out? Tell people about, let people know about?
I mean, the biggest thing is just, well, give the game a try, right? Like I think now after the hotfixes and so on, it's really fun. There's a lot of really cool stuff coming. I mean, every day I'm in our design discussions and I love it. And I think we just have an amazing team, right? Like every time when we talk about features and so on, we can get stuff done super quick. I would want to kind of like create that narrative now, right? And really show people how strong our team is by just doing things so quickly and deliver so many cool features that you would go, well, what is going on with grinding gear games and Blizzard, and why are they not as fast as us, right? Like that kind of thing. So just play the game, leave us a ton of feedback, and we'll perfect the crap out of it. That would really help us.
Awesome. Yeah, go get the game, guys. It's really good.
I also recommend giving it a try.
I love it.
I've enjoyed my time with it so far. Anxious to get back into it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Hey.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap this one up. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a safe weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
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 Yeah.